Yo, yo, welcome to another episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horwitz. Hit me up on Twitter, NJH287, also on Blue Sky, NJH287. On LinkedIn, you can find me where I post more content. The website where you can find everything is dsmsports.net. And the podcast is on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. Check out the full back catalog, subscribe, do whatever you like to do with your favorite podcasts. Just a tremendous show for you guys today. I'm so delighted by this conversation. Super insightful. Tons of good examples, a really thoughtful guest. My guest on the podcast today is Jared Harding. He is the founder and CEO of Toodly. Prior to Toodly, he spent many years building the digital and social operation and content strategy for Kroenke Sports Entertainment that encompasses the Denver Nuggets, the Colorado Avalanche, the Colorado Mammoth. I may be missing some other properties as well. There's a massive operation that, as you'll hear, Jared basically built from the earliest days. He was the first digital person they really had. And now he's doing great things with Toodly, helping people with brand identity, with marketing strategy, digital strategy, content strategy, particularly in the sports space, but also beyond. So you're going to hear and learn a lot from Jared. Here he is, Jared Harding, founder and CEO of Toodly. Back on the podcast with today's guest, and I'm so psyched to talk to him. Every time I talk to him, we have a great conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Jared Harding. He is founder and CEO of Toodly. And welcome to the podcast today, Jared.
Thanks so much, Neil. I'm really glad to be here.
So psyched to pick your brain. You have such a great wealth of knowledge and experience, and have been doing this for a long time. Both you and me are kind of old people in this industry. Not to date us too much. But before we get into the meat of our discussion, Jared, tell us about your career path. All the stops along the way, and what you're doing today, of course, and any tips for folks that want to do what you do.
Yeah, you bet. So without boring the listeners too much with all of the many years of history, I will say I had a unique entry into sports and into marketing in general. I was an English major in college. I loved writing. I loved the self-expression it allowed me, and I always sort of saw myself as becoming an English teacher, maybe a college professor. Loved playing basketball. Thought coaching might be part of my life, and it actually was for quite a while. But after college, most of my friends were busy applying for real jobs. Real is in air quotes, and I dreamed of adventure, and so I waited tables for 6 months and saved up some money, and I went off to Australia with the intent to work. I got a 4-month work visa.
Oh.
But when I landed in Sydney, I came across a week-long surfing trip up the coast, and so I thought I'd delay my work for a week, and well, that turned into 4 months of backpacking around Australia, and during that trip, about 2.5 months in, I was in Cairns up on the northeast coast, and some friends and I who were traveling together, we went to a pro basketball game, and watching it, I had some thoughts about, like, I could play at this level. I think I can play with these guys, and that stayed with me. And so after I got back to the States, I started getting back in shape and saving up some more money, and I ended up going back to Europe, to England, to stay with some friends I'd met. I got an agent, and I ended up playing basketball overseas for 3 years, in a variety of places. I mean, basketball took me to Germany. It took me to Denmark for a season. I had short stints in France and Spain, and then longer ones in Ireland and England. I got to play in China. So it was amazing to kind of get to do something I love, which is play basketball, and also have the adventure of living in all these countries. And in my last year, I was in England and figured that would be a good spot to get a master's degree in English. So I did that, and I stayed. And by the time I got back, this was in the days of Monster.com.
Okay.
And so I thought I should probably make some sort of effort to find a job. And I put my resume up on Monster, had some interviews for some teaching gigs, and I ended up getting an offer from Kroenke
Mhm.
from the guy who ended up hiring me. His name's Brian Kitts. He's the CMO of the arts and venues for the city of Denver now, and amazing human. And he said, I can teach you how to market, but I can't teach you how to write or communicate. And that really stuck with me. Um, and so I embarked on a career at KSE in marketing and PR at first, and had the opportunity early on doing all the ad buying for the Nuggets and the Avs and the
Wow.
Rapids. Ticket Horse, which was our ticketing company back then. It later became Altitude Tickets.
Mhm.
And so I just got this sort of wide, wide breadth of like participation in all these different facets of the business. And one thing I really noticed was the data coming back on the digital ads that we were running, and how informative that was compared to print or radio or outdoor TV. And so I began thinking about the fact that we didn't have any digital strategy at that time. We had an interactive media department which built and maintained websites, and we had a marketing department. And so I proposed a digital strategist position at KSE that that evolved, particularly with Facebook and Instagram and Twitter emerging. All of those accounts I started at KSE. Each time I went to our CMO and said, hey, this Facebook thing I think is going to be a big a big thing. I think we should have an account for the Nuggets and the Avs and Mammoth, et cetera. And so I really I learned those platforms by doing and by trial and error. And it was so under the radar for so many years. I had the really good fortune of working with Jason Mitchell and Eric Dieter in their early days at Movement Strategy. And they're absolutely crushing it still. And they certainly informed and helped push me in terms of what we could do in the social space, and what made sense. And I really just connected with those guys, and we did a lot of really fun activations together. And so anyway, fast forward, I became the content arm, and then started building a team over the years. And it culminated in my last 2 years at KSE, where I was the head of digital. It included 4 different divisions. There was 32 people on my team. We had a creative team, which was comprised of digital video editors and producers. We had digital graphic designers. We had a content team, which was focused on publishing and managing all of our social accounts. We had a front and back end development and technology team, and then an analytics team. And so I learned so much, at KSE. And one of the biggest takeaways for me was just the two things. One, learning to be adaptable. All of these platforms and technologies and things have changed and evolved over time, and so just embracing that. And then also seeing something that I didn't know and that was a little bit scary to learn or to think about learning, which back then was social media, and just going head on into it. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, so that and then later this year, or earlier this year, pardon me, I branched out on my own and opened up Tootly, which is a brand strategy consulting company, doing a lot of brand identity work, a lot of content strategy work, and it's been very different. I'm focused in sports, by the way, and sports properties and organizations, and it's been freeing. And as I was telling you, as we first started talking before we started recording, I've just learned so much about myself, and I've grown so much in a short time. Just diving in and learning learning the business, learning what it takes to run a business.
So cool. I mean, shit, Jared. Like I learned stuff about you that I didn't know previously, and I want to read your autobiography now. And you're still going, obviously, with Tutor. I mean, you and I have to trade notes at some point about Australia because I spent a little bit of time in Australia, not living there, and the surfing trip. And I mean, I guess I'd be remiss before we get into more of like the actual like strategy stuff and the social media geekery and sports stuff. Uh, what's that process like of like seeing a professional basketball game, being like, hey, I can keep up with those guys. Maybe let's try this, and then you just go and find an agent and then like, get a like. Did you have to like just use the internet and Google like find a basketball agent and then go on tryouts? Like, how did that actually work?
Yeah, that's essentially what I did. My family thought I was nuts, and I didn't care. I said I'm 22 or 23, and if I don't give it a whirl right now, I'm going to regret it. And so, yeah, it was literally hopping on Eurobasket, trying to connect with teams, reaching out to coaches, and ultimately, an agent was helpful in making some of those connections. But it was believing in myself and going for it.
So cool. And as you mentioned, just a great way to see the world as well. I mean, I knew some people that played overseas in Europe also, and it truly is like what better way to spend your early 20s than just traveling around and getting paid to play a sport you love and be able to see all these different cities, and it's so cool. So we can do a whole other podcast on that journey, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Really awesome. And I love too, like the English background and kind of like the first thing that came to my mind is like all this comes down to storytelling and that's still what you do now with creating brands, creating content and strategies and that goes back to your understanding of that being understanding how important it is to be a writer and to be a reader and to understand how to tell stories. And yes, there's the growth of generative AI now, and you can tell ChatGPT to write an essay for you. But even then, like that's not going to like dilute the value of being able to articulate things in your head or articulate the right words to say something. So I love the fact that that's kind of been a foundation for you as you continue to grow throughout your career.
Yeah, it really has, and it's given me an appreciation for all forms of storytelling. I worked with and eventually managed, as I mentioned, designers and video producers, and don't have a high level skill set in those areas like they do, but just watching them in their craft and seeing their processes and of course seeing what they are capable of producing, like I appreciated it so much.
Oh yeah. And let's talk about how you came into these roles at KSE a little bit. I mean, starting out like as I alluded to earlier, everyone kind of has a different path into social, and social is becoming a thing, let alone content as well. And you mentioned kind of understanding or starting to ask those questions about what can we learn from what we're doing, what kind of data is coming in. I guess what did your mindset think, or what did data look like then, and how did you kind of know what was signal versus noise and how that ultimately become like your opportunity to I guess teach the older people about what they didn't know about yet and becoming an expert in something that no one was expert in yet.
Yeah, and I mean that's I'm smiling as I heard your question because there were there were years and years of seeing the day-to-day um, data on these posts across these social platforms, like seeing the comments, like observing how quickly certain posts would get engagement and like learn. There's so much learning, and I intuitively just realized how important these platforms were at the time and would become over time to sports brands and to revenue. But I was smiling because um, almost on a daily basis, it would be like, this is great and all, Jared, but how are we going to monetize this?
Yeah.
Like, what is the ROI on all this time you're spending on Twitter or on Facebook in the early days? And I really I had to learn how to explain what I was seeing and how to prove the value And I certainly didn't always handle it with patience, but it taught me patience, and it taught me um, how important it is to be able to, like I said, it was intuitive, but that doesn't work in the business world. I can't just say like, trust me, I can feel it. This works.
Right.
Like I had to figure out over time what were the KPIs, what were the things that would be received, that the head of ticket sales or our CMO or our head of partnerships would understand, would over time bring value. And so that was such a great school for me to attend for many years.
Yeah, I mean, shit. Like I'm sitting here like grinning as well, like thinking back to the old days of like using Ticketmaster came from codes or whatever we used to with Ticket Horse back at KSE as well, and like you're not going to get too many clicks and conversions of ticket sales from a Facebook post. It's just not going to happen. You may get a
Right.
half dozen ticket sales, and that's not the way to think about it. And we're still grappling a little bit with like, how to improve the direct ROI. Yes, there's sponsorship revenue, and there is more tracking, capabilities as well, and performance marketing. But brand marketing is still a big thing, especially in the sports world, where you want to be cool and you want to have people that want your product and want to consume your product, even if you don't have a direct way to sell them a ticket, because you're getting fans all over the place. I guess too, like when did content start to become more operationalized and strategic? And I mean, you're probably a one-man show early on, and then you started to add people and understand what you needed to add. How did you start to think about like the ROI of not necessarily ROI of content, but think strategically about not like how we actually need to produce content, what resources we need, how do we justify those resources? How is that build up like, and what would you take away from it even today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still on its way. It has evolved tremendously. When I started observing the scrutiny that myself and our team was under, at first it felt like all of a sudden, like everyone started to care about what we were doing. But that was actually a sign that what we were doing was impactful for the
Yeah,
business and other people were starting to see it.
yeah,
Um, and so the ultimately, businesses they want to build revenue opportunities, right? There's a lot of other things that matter, but for a business to stay in business, um, they need to produce revenue. And so when I started finding ways to help other departments see the value and see how it could turn um, could increase sales, could become an asset for our partners that previously wasn't there. It didn't exist. And
yeah.
now it's a whole new realm of assets that could be monetized in that way. Um, when it started to become obvious what social media content can do for a brand, and how that impacts marketing, and there's so many different opportunities that it supports. And I mentioned Jason Mitchell from Movement Strategy. Like, he has a term that I love, called social centric marketing, and that's how I've seen it for years, and that's how I see it now. And that the smartest marketers are looking at all marketing through the lens of social. It doesn't mean what are we producing on social, but how can every sort of aspect of our marketing become something that our customers might share on social and live in that way. And so um, I still think it's an evolution, and some brands are further along than others. But anywhere that there's that many people connecting and engaging and spending their time, every single day. I don't care if it's social media or some new platform or new space that we haven't even thought of yet. Wherever that is going to be incredibly important to business and to revenue generation.
Yeah. No, I'm sitting here thinking about like all the different like the fact that it became so much more meritocratic to be able to get your voice out there, and that if you produce good content and produce content that your fans want to consume, you have the
Yep.
ability to reach them. And like we always you just say like we have to earn the right to market to our fans. You have to earn their attention. And I was listening to Gary Vee recently on a podcast too, and he was thinking about talking about like the new wave of these recommendation feeds and the TikTokification of social media to some degree, and how like you now get to control like if you reach people or not, because if your content's good, it'll reach more people. As opposed to back in the old days where it was strictly like almost strictly pay to play, and you had to figure out the best way to boost your content and hope that it would reach the right people. But yeah, it's just an interesting way to think about that social media centric version of it, where it's truly like we're in more control now with our relationship with our fans. We don't have to go through these more old school gated channels of newspaper buys and radio buys and the stuff that you were doing when you first started at KSC, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and it was all one-sided messaging. It was all like, here's our brand, and here's what we want from you, and now that just doesn't work because people want to be in a conversation, and they want content. Like this is like one of my main takeaways in my entire career is that if if you want to be successful on social media, you have to create content that provides value to your customers or potential customers, and just focus on that. That value can be, it can be entertainment, it can be information. There's a lot of different ways to define what value is, but what it's not is just telling them what you want from them. And so that's one of those things that just seems obvious to me. Like as a user of these platforms, when I'm scrolling through, like, yeah, I don't want to connect with someone that's constantly telling me to go spend money with them.
Right.
But if I like the content and I think it's funny, or I think it's inspiring, or I'm learning something from it, like, I'm going to remember that brand over time, and I'm going to feel like they actually care about me and they're actually trying to help me. And so when it comes to spending my money down the line, those are the brands that I spend my money with.
Totally.
Yeah.
I kind of want to get into like a little bit of the sort of the granularity of the strategy now too, and certainly with clients you work with Tudely, as well as of course as it came about with the KSE brands. I mean, one reason I was really excited to talk to you is because KSE and these multi-property brands are so interesting. That the fact that you could sit here and talk about overseeing content and social and digital strategy for an MLS team, the Colorado Rapids, an NHL team, the Colorado Avalanche, an NBA team, the Denver Nuggets. I mean,
Yep.
it's just a lacrosse team. It's like so many different audiences and segments and different ways to produce content. And yes, you want to find efficiencies as well. But let's get into a little bit just the like strategy, voice, content cadence, types of content pillars, and packaging. Like how'd you go about, like, I guess first off, how did you first find get into that? We need to have a different voice for this brand versus this brand potentially, and here's the kind of content that resonates with this brand. This platform's more important for this team. Like, how did you start to manage all that? And I mean, my head hurts just trying to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, candidly, it was hard and it was a moving target, right? And I think the most the best we did over time at nailing it in terms of voice, style, tone, was when our team, meaning our content team, was closely connected to the front office and to team ops and to the players, and was around and was at the training facility and at the practices and on the road, and really got to know what the vibe was like and what the culture was like. And like what words were being used um, by Jared Bednar or Coach Malone, or like, and being able to extract some of those micro moments and the feelings and use that as a foundation for how we communicated um, publicly on these channels. Because when we didn't have that access, and there was separation, and we might be able to go shoot some content, or be delivered some content or whatever, there we were guessing, right? We were guessing at what that was, and but especially over the last, I think, 5 years, there were some really positive developments in terms of that access and those relationships, and it takes time, right? It takes time to develop that trust, and so I think that's the biggest key to ensuring that you're hitting the right tone, is being part of the culture and being part of the team. And so, and then in terms of I think your other question was around, um, how do we differentiate between different properties and how we approach them, and what were the learnings? And the short of it is, we we had centralized resources that worked across platforms and across properties, and so we would scale those, and scale third party platforms as well, and other functions and learnings as best we could, and those could come from any one of our properties, and so I think we did a pretty good job of that, and so much of that is because we were all on one team. Like the Rapids group was separate from our team. Ours was based, the Nuggets, the Avs, the Mammoth, and Altitude. We were based at Ball Arena, and then the Rapids were out at Dick's Sporting Goods Park. So just because of the difference in location, they had their own team, but we shared ideas, we communicated with them regularly, and they're awesome to work with too. So I think overall, like, and now with the Rams and with Arsenal, like, KSE really has done a nice job of being intentional about sharing knowledge and sharing resources and learnings.
I mean, how intentional did you want? I mean, I guess, like, did you want fans to know that the Nuggets and Abs were siblings of some sort, that were related? Like,
Yeah,
so that was intentional, kind of, and that would help a little bit in the sort of the marketing, I guess, to some degree.
definitely. Yeah, like, we as content producers definitely have wanted that for a long time, and saw the value in that, in the cross promotion and the support, and you know we yeah, I think Gary Harris and Gabe had a UC Health um, sponsorship and commercial they did together, where they were like, the joke was they were like living in, I think at that time it was called Pepsi Center, but in the arena, and they had, it was a really cute, like, funny kind of commercial that UC Health did, but where it was, the joke was that the arena was the home, and they both lived, both the Avs and the Nuggets live at that arena, and
Yeah.
so, but embracing that in social, like, I don't know if you saw, but um, this year I thought Haley, who's the head of content there at KSE, and she's phenomenal, did a really nice job um, of of pairing Jokic and Gabe. I'm sorry, not Gabe, and
Hey,
Nathan McKinnon, where they both are coming off of MVP seasons. There's, obviously a lot of marketing overall involved, but from a content perspective, capturing Jokic, handing McKinnon the MVP trophy, and then vice versa, like the first game for the Nuggets, and capturing that on social, and the way that it was captured and broadcasts in different ways on different channels. I think as a fan, like, whether you're a Nuggets fan or an Avs fan or both, like, I think it's really cool to see these guys playing at these incredibly high levels, and then supporting one another and having so much respect for one another. Avs players, Mammoth players all go to Nuggets games. Nuggets players and Mammoth players go to the Avs games like over time. Like this has just always happened. And so telling those stories, like those, that's part of the story, right? And being able to capture those moments and and yeah, they're all KSE, right? And so I think um there's a uniqueness there. It's not, not all NBA and NHL teams have the same ownership. So being able to support one another was definitely a fun story for us to be able to tell in different ways over time.
Oh yeah, being able to lean into that. Yeah, and as you were talking about like McKinnon and Jokic, I was already recalling in my head. Even before you even started talking about it, I was thinking about it in my head around like how my text blew up when everyone saw Jokic on ice skates, and it was like, oh, look at this, so cool. He can.
Yeah,
That was awesome.
he's hilarious.
How much like difference did you have to take into account for the types of content, the voice? I mean, I think about like I'm almost intimidated sometimes thinking about like what do we like to run an NBA team social because there's a lot of like pop culture references and even like whatever hip hop and things that may not resonate as much with like NHL fans or like is it
Yeah.
really like we're going after the Denver fan and part of it is we want you to be a Denver fan, and therefore you're a fan of all Denver sports, and that would include the Rockies as well, I guess. Or like, is it truly we need to talk to the Nuggets fans differently than the Avalanche fans, and find some opportunities for crossover, but understand that there are some differences by design.
Yeah, I think more of what you just said last. Yeah, it's the NBA culture is just different than NHL, and so I think embracing the differences and who the organizations are different, like they just are, and so embracing that is important. Um, and so I think it would be a mistake to treat all Denver fans or all Colorado fans in the same way and market to them in the same way. But there is opportunity for some crossover. You know, organically. Like some of that just happens organically. And so I think the fine line is not, doing the things that make sense and finding crossover opportunities that that unfold for you without forcing it.
And did that sort of that crossover opportunity come into play when you're talking about building assets as well, where hey, like we found that we can do this, whatever, top five plays of the week, or assist of the game, and that can be a
Yeah,
hockey assist and a lacrosse assist and a soccer assist and a basketball assist, and let's all sell it in one package. Like,
totally. Yeah.
how did that sort of evolve as your time went on?
Now that happened all the time. Like that's I would bucket that into the scaling, scaling some learnings, right? And so um we started developing digital partnership packages and working with I worked really closely with Mike Seeley, who's the head of partnerships at KSE and just a great person, really really smart, and humble individual, and so he really gave me sort of sponsorship 101 over the years and helped me learn what it takes to sell partnerships for sports brands and what were some of the challenges and opportunities and so one of them was scaling across different properties. Like it would be much tougher to sell a package, 10 highlights for the Avs, but then on the Nuggets, we want to do something completely different. It was just more valuable to have packages that mirrored one another. And so we worked really hard over the years on trying to find ways to do that effectively.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, even just being an observer of sports business now, you can see there's certainly plenty of differences, but every sport's gonna have generally like a starting lineup graphic. Every sport's gonna have some
Yeah,
sort of like player of the game oftentimes or game preview or whatever
totally.
mic'd up content. So it's certainly cool to see that. You mentioned too like a little bit of like the content operations being a little bit centralized, which I think I've heard the same thing about like MSG as well with the Rangers and Knicks. So like how much of that is then, hey, this is the time of year when we're going to focus a little bit more on this team because they're in season. But then also, like, is there times when like a team goes on an unexpected winning streak, or there's a big milestone coming up, and you sort of have to drop everything, not drop everything, but shift resources a
Yeah.
little, focus on one property over another. Like how much of that was like a challenge at times, and also I guess an opportunity.
Yeah, you were giving me some flashbacks to some different different campaigns and big initiatives and yeah, the answer is you do, or we did shift in different directions to prioritize, what was imminent or what was perceived as a really big deal. And we just kind of tried to do the best that we could in terms of anticipating what was coming, planning for those tentpole events. Some things, of course, are unplanned, right? And that happens a lot in sports. There's things that you can't anticipate and they just happen and you have to react to those. And yeah, like, of course, that can be a challenge, but that's also one of the really beautiful and exciting things about sports is I remember the adrenaline rush that would feel like for me when something would happen and I would wanna capitalize on it as quickly and as effectively as possible. And so yeah, that is part of working in sports. And then also, over the years, like I thought a lot about my team and like the impact that sort of thing can have and what it had on me. I had small kids at the time and was working almost every Avs and every Nuggets home game, and that was grueling, man. It was like it was fun. I loved being there, and it was hard, and so I think over time, like and through a lot of feedback and discussion, and I started to learn like, okay, like there is another way. It doesn't have to be this way. There's ways that we can um, allow, not allow, but actually encourage staff to get away from it, and they can actually do that and know that there's people that have their backs and are going to uphold the standards that they've upheld. So
Totally. I mean, yeah, yeah. Not to use the term load management, but like you're gonna be better if you have time to recover rather than just keep continuing to grind. Then your work just suffers, and like no
no
one
doubt,
scenario.
no
And
doubt.
how did kind of be also like did you come to oversee and I guess this certainly plays into what you're doing now with Tootly as well, that yes, you started out coming up in digital and then social and then content and then like, and also you did some ad buying and like then all of a sudden digital's become so much more sophisticated, and there's like now you have to think about mobile apps, think about at some points like there was metaverse conversation, NFT
Yeah.
conversation, all these other ways that digital touched the fan experience. Like you just sort of have to pick up these new platforms, new mediums. I mean, no one had a mobile app 20 years ago, and now everyone does, and you have to have a strategy for it.
Yeah. I would say just generally that sports content has taught me so much about valuing storytelling and connection and access and being authentic or real or whatever however you want to call it or say. Like I think it's calling it how it is. And so all of those things apply to any brand, to and outside of sports teams, of course, with them as well. But then all of the you mentioned mobile apps and all the new tech and ton of AI developments in the last couple of years, and those as I mentioned with social media in 2008, 2009, like those are just the things that are developed. Like technology is always going to change and evolve, and my approach is I can feel uncomfortable around what's happening and pretend it's not happening, or I can embrace what it is and have humility and learn about those things and apply them. And so, um, one of the things that I'm learning with Tootly is that there's that essentially everyone is looking for help in the same way, and their objective is growth. They want their business to grow, and the same was true at KSE. We wanted our business to grow, and that can manifest in social media and content, or in marketing, or in partnerships, or in different types of sales, and there's all sorts of tactics within each of those areas. But we're all talking about the same objective, which is growth. And social media always spoke to me because I instantaneously saw the connection and impact that that two-way conversation we talked about that it made, and the instant feedback, and I just had the long view of understanding it would create significant business value. And so what I've learned is, like, the mechanisms can change, but the connection to customers is what's most important. And so that what sort of that, and then being true to your brand. And then one thing I think is underrated, or maybe not talked about as enough, is just listening. Just um, like as a sales tactic, like I hate, like, some of these words I actually have a reaction to. But it's actually just listening to what your customers are saying, and then, like, genuinely trying to do what you can to give them what they're asking for. And it sounds really simple, but to me, like, this means tapping into what is holding so many of us back, at work, and maybe in other ways. But that's the noise that's in our heads, the fear, the insecurity, the comparison, and instead just truly listening to what we know to be true. And the real reason businesses are created is to solve problems. It's to help people. It's to provide value for people. And so I have this diverse background, and I'm, I'm taking as much of those learnings and experiences as I can into Tootly and into working with clients. And a lot of times, prospective clients or clients might have a very specific thing that they want help with, and then we can kind of, like, navigate together, like, how best to get there. And as I mentioned, before we started recording, so far that's manifested a lot into brand identity work, which is, to me, truly understanding, like, what your brand is and what your vision for it is, and finding alignment around that. And then that's the foundation for everything else, public, that you do, from a marketing perspective, a content perspective, a sales perspective. It all comes from, like, okay, well, who are we? And let's stay true to that.
Yeah, I want to touch on that too, because I've always thought, like, what's it like going from a sports brand, a big name NBA, NHL team, whatever, that has such a big kind of built-in sexiness and built-in cachet a little bit, and then going
Mhm.
to whether it's a smaller sports brand or a B2B brand or a whatever, a skincare brand, name it. And then, is it, do those skills transfer? Like, is it more difficult? Like, hey, we actually have, we don't have a built-in fan base that is going to follow us by default when we start a new platform, we start a newsletter, whatever it might be. Like, what kind of skills translate, and what are the other challenges that, like, maybe you didn't necessarily anticipate, or maybe just had to figure out a way to use those strategies and skills that you learned from sports, but adapt them to a brand that doesn't have that built-in cachet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There are a lot of things that I took for granted working for big sports brands. And there's a baseline of engagement or reach that you're going to get in anything you do. And there's just, like, a built-in, um, like, attention, that, people love sports, people love their sports teams, and they're just gonna naturally care. And so you can make mistakes. You can have mediocre content or and people are still going to engage with it. And so I think in a really good way, it's pushed me to get to the core of the purpose behind content creation and what high quality actually means. And it doesn't necessarily mean the camera we're shooting the video with. It means to me the like I mentioned earlier, the value that you're bringing to your audience.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's in addition to those things, it like the process has been really, really interesting for me and helpful. Like it's been a ton of growth. It's unraveling, and I'm still unraveling this piece of me, of my identity that is wrapped up in the Denver Nuggets or in the Colorado Avalanche and in a role that I had working for those teams. And it feels really freeing and really empowering to um, to actually have distance from that identity and to like see who I am and what I'm all about
Yeah.
even more. So in that way, it's been really beautiful and also really hard at times.
Yeah, it's so rewarding. It's like a test of like, okay, like does my shit work when I don't have, a bunch of fans that are already waiting to hear from us and a
Yep.
built-in follower base and all that. It's
Yep.
intimidating to start a new Instagram account now or to start a new account from scratch and start with zero followers and zero engagement. And it's
That's
like,
right.
okay, now I gotta see like am I time to put my money where my mouth is a little bit, or at least prove that everything I did previously was not a fluke. Oh, it's super exciting.
Yeah.
When you are working with clients for Tutorly, like how much of it is like, do they come to you with ideas and they want you to help execute those ideas and translate them, versus like they come to you with, hey, like you tell us like what should our brand be? Like here's a little bit about here's our product, here's our service, here's what we're actually putting out there. Help us understand our customer, help us understand our audience, and then translate the best way to do it. Like how much of it is like I guess teaching versus like under like listening and then executing.
Yeah, I like that question a lot. So ultimately, I'm here to meet my clients where they are, to share my experience and my expertise, however is most helpful to them. And it starts for me just with a lot of listening and a lot of learning, and ultimately to help a client grow their brand and revenue, which is, as we mentioned, generally the high level expectation or hope with any partnership. I first need to understand their vision and what the brand looks like today, what it does well, where they like it to go. I also need to understand nuances about how they run their business and, maybe what the owner's personality is like and how that sort of manifests into the business. And then I for sure can bring fresh and proactive ideas but also try to help elevate and optimize like existing ones. And often it's about like enhancing client capabilities while also being strategic. And like my favorite thing to do, and what I think is my biggest strength, what I get the most actual fulfillment from, is being a mirror for people. And what I mean by that is seeing them and reflecting themselves back
Yeah.
so, so that they can clearly see themselves too, because it's so sometimes it can get confusing to make decisions. I know this firsthand when there's external pressures and you know um, there's 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 a lot of sometimes fear or anxiety or I'm not doing this well enough, or like just these useless thoughts that run through our heads in different ways. And so I love distilling what someone is saying and then helping them make their decisions so much clearer. One of my clients, it's a basketball academy here locally, and I was talking early on with the owner, and he was, he has all these things he wanted my help with and all these objectives. This is before we started our engagement together, and he wanted help with marketing and he needed help with content, and he thought they might need some digital ads, and there's all these things, and I just said, Derek, tell me what it is about this business that drives you. Like the simple question is, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And he stopped and he really opened up to me about his childhood and about what happened to him around the sport of basketball and what he wished he had in coaches and in guidance. And he was like, he's like, what I wished I had is what I want to do for kids. And I was like, okay, that is your guiding light. Like every decision needs to filter through that lens, and you'll never make a wrong decision, man. And so that, I have the chills just recalling that story um, because that's what I want for everyone, for every business owner, to be able to like like work from the point of passion from like the real reason they're doing what they're doing, to be able to make decisions in their business through that lens.
Hell yeah. No, I love like the framing oftentimes of like just if you just ask why a few more times. It's like you put your little kid hat on.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
well, why are we running this ad? Well, because of this. Well, then why? Why are you trying to get customers? Like if you just keep on drilling down, you finally get to that like that true root of the reason. And that can guide you, more than any tactic can by itself, which is awesome to hear.
Yeah. Why is such a powerful question, man.
Hell yeah. I want to kind of finish off, thinking about just a couple minutes left here with Jared Harding of Tootly. Jared, we can go all day, and we have at times as well. Like thinking about where like you are, helping with strategy, helping with execution, you're helping bringing in other resources at times too. And that goes back to your time at KSC also. Like as we start to bring in these tools that generative AI in particular is, of course, is top of mind, but there are other aspects out there as well, of course. Like, is there almost a not a need, but like a pressure that we need to, this can allow us to scale more. Therefore, like, let's find ways to scale and be as efficient as possible. And like, how are you kind of seeing the future of what you do, of what people in your role can do when it comes to these tools that are making things a lot more easy to be effective, be efficient, and scale while not giving over everything to these platforms and not just outsourcing everything, including like that original thought.
Yeah. So one thing that I've experienced firsthand over the years, and that I'm seeing a lot of clients and people I talk to in various industries struggle with, is how overwhelming it is to manage all of these different technologies and all of these different platforms, and like how to keep up, really. And so I think one thing is distilling down, and really prioritizing how to spend your time, like, and where to spend your time. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that every brand needs to be on every single channel posting multiple times a day. That it probably is what a sports team needs to do, but not every brand. And so I think being able to resist some of it and really focus on the channels you think are the most important for your business, like that's one thing that I try to help with. I I think there's different I'm not great at predictions. I don't know. I mean, some people are better than others. I think there's different avenues that we could go down. Yeah, I definitely have been a big fan of Reddit for a long time. Like I think Discord and Twitch are showing a lot of value and could in the future. But um, I actually would go the opposite way. Like for me, what like the what I talked about and remember most loving about social media in the early days is connecting with people and feedback. And and so to me, if these channels can just be viewed as tools to make connections, um, then then I think you're seeing them for what they are. And but there's a real propensity in what I'm noticing, a real propensity for businesses to become like slaves to this technology and these systems and like the AI automation and the cold emails and outreach and like you can do a ton of that and you're going to get some business that way and you're probably going to drive your revenue for a while. But I think the long game is actually finding ways to use these different technologies and platforms as tools to connect with real people and then find real life ways to um, to make relationships with your customers. I'll give you one example. So I don't know if you've heard of, I'm not sponsored by this company, but I don't know if you've heard of Element. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's they have a couple different products now, but one, like it's essentially a salt packet with magnesium and potassium, and it's a hydration tool. And I mix it every morning in my water, and they have all these different flavors, and it's great. So I ordered some boxes, and I think I some time went by, and I ordered a few more. Then out of nowhere, I had a huge box, a heavy box on my doorstep, and I opened it, and it was like a 12 pack of canned bubbly Element water. Is a new product. I hadn't seen it. And my first thought was like, dude, I didn't order this. Like, like, they must have gotten confused. Like, I need to check my credit card. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then I like actually opened the box and I saw that it was a gift. And they're like, Jared, thanks for being a loyal customer. This is a new product. I want you to try it. And that like was so meaningful and so cool to me. They ended up doing it again with a different product like 3 weeks ago. And so finding, and that sort of goes back to what Jason Mitchell said about social centric marketing, right? Like, what can I do to to increase the odds that my customers are going to care enough to share something of their own on their own social platforms. And I think that's the most powerful piece of social media marketing.
Absolutely love that. There's so many like themes that are in my head too of creating super fans and evangelists, surprise and delight, which I always
Yep.
has always been a guiding force for me as well. And trying to hit home runs, taking big swings, hitting home runs, and not just doing the old like going through the motions and trying to get base hits every day. Like there's so many good lessons there, and I love that anecdote too, which is just a perfect way to sort of capstone this. But I will ask you one more thing before we share shareable stat, Jared. I promise. Just one more question here, and I kind of and it kind of ties into a little bit what you were talking about. Is sort of like when you see something new come about, whether it's a new behavior, a new platform, a new feature within a platform. This goes back to certainly the KSE times, but and also just today as new things come about. Like, how do you know that this is a fad versus this is this has staying power? We should lean into this. Like, is it testing and learning? Is it just are you more of an early mover and try to move first before everyone else gets into it? Like, how do you approach that in your day-to-day role and also previously?
Yeah, I think concisely, you don't know. There and depending on how big the lift is to sort of dive in, I think that's the only way to really know is to start using the new feature or the new platform or whatever the new technology is, and then see what it is like and see what results come from it. If it's a new feature on Instagram, like, okay, sure, like let's try it out. And we know with Instagram, if they have a new feature, they're probably going to prioritize it. It's probably gonna have like incremental organic reach. Like, so yeah, probably want to lean into that. But if it's some new social app that some people are starting to use, and it's it may or may not be worth spending your time on yet. So I don't know. I do with those types of things. I like to do research. I like to see what's out there, what other people are saying, and what their input is, and then kind of make an assessment on whether or not it makes sense to dive in.
Yeah, ultimately, just being endlessly curious and having an understanding of things, even if it's not right necessarily, or do you have the resources yet for your brand? Like, it's just it can be it. That's what keeps us young in the space is you have to sort of fly into things that are intimidating to you, as you did early in your career. Is run toward things that are
Right.
scary and you don't quite understand yet. How has it been kind of being on the sidelines, so to speak, and watching these sports teams and having that capability to not have to be in the trenches every day. Like, have you enjoyed kind of being a fan and on the sideline versus being in the trenches? And are you able to put your fan hat back on versus like what it was like kind of being in the office, being in the press box?
Yeah, it's been so nice, man.
Uh-huh.
Honestly, it's been so great just to be able to like hang with my kids and watch a Nuggets game or an Avs game on TV, or go to a game and just be a fan, like you said. Over the years, like um, there was I could get to being like a partial fan, but there was always like the work.
Totally.
Um, I just knew too much and was concerned about too much because I cared. And I don't mean I shouldn't have cared or done what I did. It was my job. So if a big moment happened, like I would want to see what my team was, how we were capitalizing on social, and I would look. And so it is I would say refreshing not to do that, although I still am following all the teams on social and keeping up because I I love, I know and love all the people that are working on those
Right.
platforms. I had the pleasure of working with them, and so it's been fun to root for them individually as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's nice to see not a Woj bomb anymore, but like a Shams bomb, and not have to go and draw everything if it's Nuggets related.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, Jared, we're going to start coming up in our quick hitting question segment. First episode shareable stat coming up right now. Such good stuff from Jared Harding, founder and CEO of Tootly. Could really pick his brain all day. Just so many different areas that we were able to touch on. So many good insights and takeaways. Hope you were taking notes, listening back to some key parts because I learned a lot. Just super, super insightful. And Jared has taken his learnings into Tootly now. We're going to start from Jared with our quick hitting question segment. First episode shareable stat. This shareable stat comes from the recent Pew Research Center report, which has been going around what is happening in the greater social media space in the United States. They do, I believe, an annual report of this kind, and it's always full of good, interesting stats. But we're going to keep it high level here. And the shareable stat for this episode is 68%. And that is 68% of U.S. adults aged 18 to 29, so kind of that like Gen Z range, age 18 to 29, use Facebook regularly. 68%. Now, it's slightly lower than Instagram. Instagram's at 76%, but it's higher than TikTok, which is, I think, a significant thing. Nearly 2 times what Twitter is. I know the highest by far, of course, not surprisingly, is YouTube, which is at 93%. But the 68% is one I want to focus on because while we may focus a lot of our attention on the sexier platforms like a TikTok, certainly Instagram and Instagram Reels, and even up-and-comers like Threads and Blue Sky or whatever it might be, we often think about Facebook sometimes as an afterthought. Yes, it's still a very key part of a paid ad strategy, but for some it becomes like almost like a dumping ground. Here we're just gonna think of Facebook as we'll put some content there, maybe it will or will not get shared and engaged with. It will try to what's our grandparents or our parents' generation gonna look at. But as you can see from this stat, almost 7 out of 10 US adults age 18 to 29 are using Facebook regularly. So, not here to give you any particular insights or ideas, but the more people I talk to that continue to work in the space, of course, have found ways to really drive success on Facebook, finding things that are very shareable, that are very of the moment, that are very endearing and engaging and original and creative. So, TLDR, don't sleep on Facebook. So that's a shareable stat, again, from the Pew Research Report, and that is that 68% of U.S. adults ages 18 to 29 use Facebook. That's twice as much as Twitter, more than TikTok, nearly as much as Instagram, and the only one higher is, of course, YouTube. So that's a shareable stat. Think about it, ponder it, but more importantly, stick around because more fun, more information, good stories about Nikola Jokic and among others here with Jared Harding of Tutely. Back in this episode of Shareable Stat, and I'm joined once again by Jared Harding. He is founder and CEO of Tutely. Jared, learned so much from you in your interview. Are you now ready for some quick hits?
Let's do it.
All right, number one, tell me the biggest lesson you learned about running a business so far since starting Tutely. I mean, that's super intimidating for me to think about starting a business, and you are doing the thing. So what's the biggest lesson you learned so far?
Okay, so I mean, I mentioned earlier, and I'm just thinking now, I've learned certainly a lot of things, but I think the most impactful is to stay out of my head, to just focus on the work and prioritize. So one thing that's been helpful for me is just blocking out time for the bigger things, whatever I view as the longer term, the most impactful things of the moment, and then tackling my short checklists separately from that. So otherwise, I've noticed I can kind of go back and forth, and it ends up being inefficient. And so yeah, just prioritizing and trying to keep my productivity sharp and focus high.
Yeah, it's always been intimidating for me to think about you got to focus on the clients, but also maybe a little bit on getting my next client and
Yep.
all of the above, and then also the day-to-day business stuff of keeping track of the accounting and stuff. It blows my mind.
So
So
many things. Yeah.
number two for you, Jared, I wanted to go back into your professional basketball career, which I still am delighted about hearing about. First, tell me the most memorable day of your professional basketball career, whatever it may entail, and then also give us a little scouting report on Jared Harding, basketball player.
Well, easily my most memorable day was my first game as a professional, which came in our home gym in Virum, Denmark. And it came after I had to sit out for about a month waiting for my work visa to come through. It was quite a process. So there was just a ton of relief and excitement once I got the notice that it came through and got to step on the court.
That's awesome.
And sorry, repeat the second part of the question.
Yeah, give us a scouting report, position, where your tendencies were.
Yeah,
What does the scouting report say about Jared?
yeah. I like to tell, I certainly at the time liked to tell people that I was like a really, really poor man's Chauncey Billups. Yeah, I worked really hard. I understood the game and had a fairly high basketball IQ, and that made up for my lack of athleticism and but yeah, I could kind of I defended pretty well. I handled the ball well. I shot well. I wasn't exceptional at any of those things, but I tried to be really fundamentally sound.
Did the Nuggets players, any Nuggets players, know about your background or coaches, and did it ever come up?
No,
Oh,
no, they didn't.
I'm picturing an intense game of 3-on-3 or something, and you're all of a sudden wet from the corner, and they're like, "Who the hell is this guy?"
I wasn't like, hey Jamal, did you know that like 20 years ago I played like really small time ball overseas? Like it's true. You're doing like,
I
cool,
could take
man.
I could take a few points off you in 1-on-1. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, when you're playing Denmark too, does your coach is someone there translating for you, or are they doing it in English? How did that work?
Mostly they just speak English
Okay.
they spoke English around me. In Denmark, Danish is a language only in that country. So people in Denmark just grow up learning other languages, from childhood. So everyone spoke really, really good English. Our coach, though, sometimes would just decide to only speak in Danish, I think, just to mess with me. And but it was actually fun. I actually enjoyed it. I took Danish classes while I was there,
Oh
and
wow.
I haven't retained much of it, but I actually got to a point where I could understand like most, simple conversation. So
Cool.
that was nice.
I'm sure it makes it more so relatable too when you see like a foreign NBA or NHL player or MLS player like trying to speak English and you're like, okay, I kind of know what they feel like. I trying to
Yeah,
speaking broken Danish, for example.
yeah, totally.
Number three, tell me this is gonna be a hard one. The most viral post or piece of content from your time at KSC. It can be from any property. You can name more than one property if you want. What's that piece of content or post that just went crazy?
Okay, so we've had, as you can imagine, a lot of posts do well.
Mhm.
Um, and I just want to share like the one that I want to highlight is my favorite. It didn't reach the most people ever, but at the time it did, but it's since been surpassed. But my favorite thing that we've done on social media, just because I thought it was so clever and so subtle, came in November of 2014. It was the beginning of that season. Brian Shaw was our coach at the time, and the Nuggets weren't very good that year. And it came after the Cavs had put together what was being touted as the big three. It was LeBron and Kyrie and Kevin Love, and it was all ESPN and the media outlets were talking about. Like it was just like big three this, big three that. And so ahead of the game with the Cavs, it was a home game. Uh, we decided to post a series of tweets promoting the matchup. Uh, and this was a woman by the name of Emily Wade's idea. She was my social media manager at the time, and when she told me about it, I remember dying laughing at how hilarious and clever I thought it was. And so we ended up posting a series of tweets promoting the matchup in different ways that we would cover practice or promote games anyway, kind of organically. But we were highlighting uh, Cavs role players by name. So we mentioned Sean Marion and Anderson Varejao and Tristan Thompson and Dion Waiters. And so we did this while sort of conspicuously omitting any of the big three. And like I just thought the deliberate exclusion was like playful and fun, and it took a little while, but then it got picked up by all sorts of national media outlets, including ESPN and Sports. It was on Sports Center, and um, and so anyway, just us like they just wouldn't stop talking about the Nuggets, who like sort of accidentally forgot about those three players, and it was scary actually to see the post go viral because because I didn't know how the team would react or how
Right.
the business side would react. But it created a ton of really positive discussion from fans and analysts, and yeah, so that's my most memorable. That was my favorite one.
Love that. That's fantastic. And I remember following Emily when she was out there with you. And yeah, I definitely get that too. That what you said at the end there about like not really knowing like what's gonna happen if a player or coach or whomever like, gets asked about this like and they had nothing to do with it like that's something that people don't appreciate quite enough and why like social teams have to be some not careful but you have to be cognizant of that it could make its way down to a post game scrum, and that may not be a welcome thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Next one for you, Jared. Tell me your favorite athlete you got to work with while you were at KSC and why. Another tough one.
Dude, it's actually I don't think you would ever guess who I'm going to tell you. Um, But I mean, first I do want to say like I loved working with Nicola. Uh, his just his humility and his leadership, but also like how light and hilarious he was. And also his evenness. He was the same from the time I met him when he first walked in the gym his rookie year. I did a little Q&A with him, and he I didn't even know like who he was. Like when he walked in, I was just like, who, like, is this Nicola? Like I didn't,
Right.
and and it's so funny to say that, and now he's Nikola Jokic, like the best player in the league and three-time MVP. And but he hasn't changed. He has not changed one bit from that first time, and I really respect that. But my favorite and the guy I had the most fun working with was Ty Lawson.
Oh, nice.
Um, Yeah, he, I actually connected with him again recently, and it was fun to like reflect back on this time. It was 10 years ago actually. It was in 2014. Um, but he trusted me, and I pitched him on establishing a presence on Reddit. And at that time, players had done like an AMA
Mhm.
for for our NBA or whatever, but no one was actually consistently and actively present on Reddit back then. And so I showed him numbers. I talked to him a lot about the platform and how important it was to be himself and authentic. And and he told me recently, and I didn't know this at the time, but that really resonated for him because he said as an NBA player, he was constantly being told he had to like show up in these different ways that didn't feel like him.
Yeah.
And he said this was the one place that he actually got to be himself. And he's a goofball. And so we started like hopping on some trends, and we did this gift exchange, and we had all these ideas, and we just did them. Like me and him were just, I mean, he was like he FaceTiming me and like laughing about something that happened, and it was just really fun to work with him. And one of my favorite things that we did was there was this comment like deep in a thread, and somebody commented like, this isn't really Ty Lawson, like this is like this is just like he's not really on here, like someone's doing this for him. And so I was like, Ty, did you see that comment, man? Like how sick would it be if you do a video and we reply just to that guy, and it's you. And he did this ridiculous like 5-second video being like, yo, who is this then if this isn't Ty Lawson or something like that. And it went crazy. It had like 100,000 views like
Oh,
instantaneously. And anyway, so that was he was my favorite athlete to work with. I will say on the Avs side, um, Gabe was just a consummate pro. He was so respectful and good to like everyone, all of us, and being the captain. And it would have been really easy to have an attitude or not want to do certain things, and he was always game. And yeah, I really respect him too. He's a great dude.
love those. Love that. We could totally have a whole nother conversation about Reddit, which I find that fascinating. They're certainly on the rise right now as a public company. But yeah,
Yeah.
Ty Lawson, I just remember him like maybe the one of the fast break guys I've ever seen. Like back when he's at UNC as well. A great player, a fun guy to watch, and yeah, and Gabe Landeskog, like you look up a picture of or look up the word captain in the dictionary for a hockey captain, and like he was built in a lab to be a captain, and it's great to see him, and hopefully he'll get back on the ice healthy soon.
I
And
hope so too.
beating, but I love those stories. All right, next up for you, kind of going back to some more favorites here. Tell me your favorite client or project you worked on so far with Tudor.
Yeah, this one, this one I really, I mean, it's impossible for me to answer this because, like, truthfully, I love each of my clients. Um, I think I told you this before we started recording early on, but my my number one rule with my business with Tootly is to work with people I actually like and whose businesses I want to support genuinely. And I've stuck to this. I've turned business down multiple times with people that I just didn't connect with and that I felt wanted more of a transactional relationship and I just want to have long-term partnerships with people and I understand that they're not all going to work out that way, but that is the intent that I have and so far it's going great and I'm having the best time.
The way it should be for sure, and definitely makes, I'm sure, the work much more rewarding and fulfilling, and you get to look forward to client calls, not dread them.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Next up for you, we touched on AI a little bit, and I want to hear the AI platform, if any. The answer could be none at all, that you use the most and why. Are you a ChatGPT guy? Do you use Claude a lot? Are you all over Dolly? Are you over Adobe Firefly and Generative Fill? Like what AI platform, if any, is part of your general work?
Yeah, I use ChatGPT every day. For business and personal, like it's just such a useful tool. It's I don't know if it's my favorite, but I definitely use it the most. I've I use Notion um I actually realized yesterday on a client call that I'm like barely scratching the surface on the capabilities with Notion, and I want to spend more time digging into that because I think it could be incredibly useful and help with efficiencies. So that one I'm excited about. I also use a platform called Tome, Tome, and that's just it's a presentation builder. But I've been impressed with that, and I like that one too.
Nice. We could call it there for sure. And yeah, Notion's one of those platforms where like I feel like I need to be on it, but like I haven't jumped in yet. And yet like it's so extensive. Like people sell Notion templates even. Like it's
Yeah.
definitely it's becoming its own almost like mini social platform by people sharing templates and ideas and how they're using it. It's a fascinating one for sure.
I know I kind of want to like hire a tutor to like to
All
like
right.
board me and tell me like how I could be using it like because there's so many like you said it is a little overwhelming. There's so many different ways it can be used and paths you can go down and it's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I don't know. I'm gonna go right towards it like I said I would.
Oh, yeah. Well, you let me know when you're an expert, and I'll mooch off of you. You can teach me after you teach yourself.
Perfect. Deal.
Next up for you, Jared, come down the wire here with Jared Harding of Tootly. Tell me the brand or team, excluding any KSE properties, tell me the brand or team whose social media you currently or used to most like and why. Which brand is it or which social handle is it that you're always like, they did it again?
Yeah, I mean I think the way that you just phrased that I think it's liquid death.
Yeah.
For me, like I like their humor. I like their boldness. And yeah, it is hilarious. And you can't I can't predict what they're gonna do next. Like they're it's old at this point, but their greatest hates campaign from like it was from like 2020, where they essentially transformed like online hate messages into a death metal band like album. I mean, it's just genius. It's like it's so cool. But there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of brands, man, that are getting a lot of praise and for good reason. Like Duolingo and Red Bull. Like I
Yeah.
think Red Bull's approach. First of all, it's been long lasting, and they they find ways um, to essentially like bring content that like rings true to like what Red Bull's essence is and without it being an ad and so they do a great job on the team side and I know you said not to mention KSE team so I won't but I do want to mention that the Celtics video production and
Oh
they get a
yeah.
lot of praise for this too but beautiful it's beautiful and innovative and I'm impressed with how they've uh, been able to make their social content stand out without being edgy and just being the sort of traditional franchise that they are, and making really compelling visual content.
A fantastic one. I mean, there was a bit of a time there where we were like, okay, like have we reached peak social? Like, what's next? Like, what's innovative now? And then all of a sudden, the Celtics came out with this whole new way of producing video, and you're like, okay, so we haven't hit the ceiling. Like, there is still more directions to go, and that was really
Yep,
cool. And, yeah,
agreed.
if you haven't listened to it yet, I would recommend the How I Built This podcast with the Liquid Death episode. To hear the story of it and hear that guy talk. Really, I would recommend that one for sure. So that's a good call out too. All right, it's time for our food question, Jared. Always got your food question. Tell me if you and I meet up in Denver again. I was lucky enough to see you at the Gondola Conference in person in real life. But if I come back out there, what is the best meal to get in Denver, and where are we going to get it?
Dude, this is such a hard question. I love eating out, and I love every type of food. And Denver has some really good restaurants. I don't know how well known that is, but there is a really good food scene here. There's a couple spots. One spot for sure that I've heard amazing things about, but I haven't been there yet, is it's called Beacon. And then, ones that are sort of staples are L5, Garden Grace, Safta. My wife and I really love Frosca, which it's in Boulder technically, and then Root Down in the Highlands. Although Root Down now has for a few years now had a restaurant. Excuse me. They have a Root Down in the airport, and so that's sort of diminished the like how I've looked at Root Down. Although we went there for our anniversary this year, and the food is different than what they have in the restaurant, and it's still phenomenal. All that said, if I had to go to only one place, I think I would pick Sushi Den. Sushi is just so fun to eat, and they have incredible sushi there.
There we go. Sign me up. But we will do it. All right, almost to the finish line here. Number nine for Jared. Tell me your most memorable Nuggets game and your most memorable Avs game from your time at KSE.
Okay, Nuggets is easy. It was it was winning the NBA Finals in 2023,
Yeah.
in Game 5. I mean, how do you top that? Uh, and honestly, like I think my most memorable Avs game was in 22, and it was Game 6, and sorry, it was Game 5, and we had a chance to close the series out at home. It was a Friday night, and I I don't know. I hadn't worked at KSE when there had been a championship, and I my whole team was working, and the Avs had looked great, and I just thought it was going to happen on that night. And so like the anticipation for that and like being there with my team and the excitement is what I remember. Um, the Avs ended up losing and then going to Tampa and winning Game 6 on a Sunday. But I still think that Game 5 was the most memorable, um, because of like just what it felt like to be in that building. Like the I remember the open, and just like I'd never experienced. I was up in the press box, for the open, and I had never experienced that arena that loud, and I felt this connection, and I like it was one of those moments where it just hit me, like why I was doing what I was doing, why I was working in sports. And I the energy of all of these Avs fans being directed towards the ice, like all in unison. I just felt really connected um to that community and to my team specifically, and to the sport and to sport in general. So although we didn't win in that one, I'll never forget how it felt to be in that arena.
That's getting goosebumps just hearing that. I mean, I'm broken record on this at some points, but it's just like you have to remind yourself to stop and smell the roses and look around and be like, all these people care about this. Like I'm in it. This is like what I get to do every day. And look at how this cool atmosphere that I'm part of. Like you can get bogged down in the work you have to do, but you have to step back and realize like this awesome atmosphere and this awesome opportunity. And yeah,
Amen. Yep.
I'm sure it's also it's super cool that the fact that like you got to be there for both these organizations, the Abs and the Nuggets, that they were down in the doldrums, and like the Abs were one of the worst teams in the NHL for a
Oh
while.
yeah.
And the Nuggets, had their down times as well, and then be able to see the ascent to a championship team, like super rewarding for you. And I'm glad you were there. Had not left for Tudor yet before seeing both those teams raise the cup, so to speak.
Yeah, me too. It was just being there for all those years, and like you said, seeing the lows and some other highs, and finally, finally winning championships. I know the Avs have before, but being working at KSE 4-1, and then I grew up a Nuggets fan. I remember going to Nuggets games at McNichols with my dad, and I remember just sort of the expectation or the feeling that like the Nuggets would never really have the star power that needed to win a championship was but being a kid and like hoping that they would and like wanting it so badly. And then in 2009 when we got Chauncey and made that Western Conference Finals run, feeling like we were so close and like that was our chance. But yeah, just it was really it was beautiful. I was standing as the buzzer sounded, I was standing next to Vic Lombardi from altitude, and he's a long time. I mean, he's born and raised in Denver, and we just put our arms around each other, man, and just like took it in, and yeah, it was really special.
That's just so awesome. Oh, I feel like that's a good question to end on, but I have one more for you before we get to your shout outs. And I want to hear about the origin. I love asking this question about hearing business names. So tell us about the origin of the name Tootly. Where did it come from? What does it mean? And how'd you come up with it?
Yeah, I'd love to, man. So tootly it's just a ridiculous and a fun way of saying totally.
Yeah.
That's it. And it reminds me of how I want to feel in life and in work. I thought of many more serious and traditional names. But I jokingly texted my best friend and I was like, what about tootly? And this is a word that we've thrown around for years and
Yeah.
just laughed at how silly we were. And as soon as I sent the text, I instantly knew that was it. I'm like, this is my company, man. I'm gonna name it what I want. We're gonna call it Tootly. And that's it.
That is awesome. And if people have not seen the cover art for this podcast episode or read it, TEWDILOY, Tootly. I know I called it totally the first time I saw it, and now Tootly is in my head forever. And I love it. All right, Jared, you kicked ass in your quick hitters. Now your chance to take over the podcast for a moment and give us your social media all-star to follow. It doesn't have to be social. It can be LinkedIn, a blogger if you want, a podcast host, a Twitter follow, LinkedIn follow, whatever platform they're on. Tell us who they are and why they're following.
Yeah, you mentioned him actually briefly early on, and I the person I would name is Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. It and the reason is, I remember when he wrote Jab 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 Right Hook in 2013, and that was sort of in the early days of social, and I remember reading it and just like loving the truth of what he was saying. And it was so much of it was how I was feeling and how I saw social, and he's intensely optimistic and energetic, but also kind and supportive, and he certainly has his own approach to social, and it's not my approach, but I love his authenticity and his motor, and really what I perceive as his intent. He's a great follow for sure.
Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, every time I've heard him speak, whether or watched a video or just followed him, like he's someone that I've always had to like pause and rewind, or like listen another time, because it's just so many good nuggets and good insights that feel so obvious, but then when he puts it into words, you're like, okay, that totally makes sense. Like, why haven't I thought about that way? And just awesome stuff there. All right,
Yeah,
how
I
about
love that he,
go ahead.
sorry to interrupt. One more thing about, I just love that he doesn't hold back. He just
Yeah.
like says what he thinks. And he's he's like, he's wrong sometimes and he admits it, but he just says what he thinks. And there's something really refreshing about that.
Unfiltered, baby. That's how it should be. And how about you, Jerry? Where can we find you as well as all things Tootly across the web and digital social?
Yeah, it's Toodly.com, TWDILLY.com. And you can find me on all the socials at Toodly.
Check them out, listen to them, learn from them, check out Tootly. And cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast today, Jared, sharing your vast knowledge and insight. You're so articulate with the stuff, and really appreciate you coming on the pod today.
Dude, it's been so fun. Thanks so much, Neil.
Awesome stuff with Jared Harding, founder and CEO of Tootly. I really enjoy every time I get to talk to Jared. He is so thoughtful, really sharp and smart. Really understands this space from the ground up, and everything beyond as well. Getting into things about what we're doing this all for, or what your identity is, and how that translates into content, into strategy, into driving revenue and growth. Just really gets it, connecting the dots from all angles, and cannot thank Jared enough for coming on the podcast today and sharing some of his thoughts and wisdom and expertise with us. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening and downloading. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. Hit me up on Twitter at NJH287. Also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. Blue Sky at NJH287 as well. Check out the website, dsmsports.net, and also my pet project website, slyke.co for communal content curation. I hope you check it out and find some value there. And of course, the podcast, which on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. Until next time, this is Neil Horowitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.